Starving bear, cub collapses in the snow. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The wind howled through the pines, carrying snowflakes that stung like tiny needles against any exposed skin. Inside the small wooden cabin nestled on the mountainside, Savannah Reed hummed softly as she rocked her 10-month-old daughter Lily in her arms. The baby's curious blue eyes gazed out through the frost-kissed window, tiny hands pressing against the cold glass. Outside, the world was a blank canvas of white, beautiful yet merciless. "I'll be back in an hour," called Logan from the doorway, bundling himself in layers of wool and weatherproof gear. "The generator needs fuel, and we're running low on firewood. The storm's supposed to get worse tonight." Savannah nodded, worry lines creasing her forehead. "Be careful out there. The radio said this might be the worst blizzard in 50 years. The door closed with a heavy thud, and Logan's figure quickly disappeared into the swirling white. Savannah sighed, placing Lily on her playmat near the crackling fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows across the cabin's wooden walls, creating a cozy contrast to the raging storm outside. "Mommy needs to check on our supplies, sweetie," Savannah whispered, kissing Lily's forehead. "Play with your blocks for a bit." As Savannah busied herself in the small kitchen area, counting their remaining canned goods and water bottles, she didn't notice Lily crawling back toward the window. The baby pulled herself up using the windowsill, babbling excitedly at something moving outside. Beyond the glass, barely visible through the curtain of snow, a small, dark shape stumbled through the drifts. Its movements were jerky, desperate. A bear cub, no more than a few months old, fought against the deepening snow. Its fur, which should have been thick and glossy, hung in matted clumps against a frame where ribs protruded painfully. The cub's eyes, usually bright with mischief and curiosity, were dull with exhaustion and hunger. Each step seemed to cost the little creature immense effort. It would push forward, collapse, then force itself up again. The cub's mother was nowhere to be seen, perhaps lost to hunters or separated in the brutal storm. This little one was alone, starving, and quickly losing the battle against the elements. Lily pressed her face closer to the glass, her warm breath creating foggy circles that quickly froze into delicate patterns. The cub looked up suddenly, as if sensing it was being watched. For a brief moment, its eyes met Lily's through the window, a connection between two young souls, one safe and warm, the other fighting for its next breath. The cub took one more stumbling step before its legs gave out completely. It collapsed into the snow just 20 feet from the cabin, its small body almost immediately being covered by the relentless snowfall. A weak, plaintive cry carried on the wind, a sound so full of desperation and fear that it seemed to pierce the cabin walls. Lily's small face crumpled with concern. She began to whimper, then cry, pointing insistently at the window. Savannah, distracted by her inventory, called out, "What is it, sweetheart? Did you see a squirrel?" But Lily continued to cry, her little body shaking with emotion as she watched the bear cubs struggle. Something in the baby's developing mind recognized suffering, even if she couldn't understand it. The cub's movements grew weaker, its breath coming invisible, labored puffs that grew fainter with each passing moment. In the kitchen area, Savannah found half a loaf of bread, still fresh enough to eat. She placed it on the counter beside some dried fruit and nuts, enough to stretch their meals until Logan returned with more supplies. The cabin creaked under the assault of the wind, and a sudden draft blew through, momentarily dimming the fire. When Savannah turned to check on Lily, her heart stopped. The playmat was empty. The baby was no longer by the window either. Instead, the cabin's door stood ajar, snow already piling on the threshold. "Lily!" Savannah screamed, rushing to the door. Outside, in the swirling white chaos, a small figure in a red onesie crawled determinedly through the snow, leaving a trail of tiny handprints and knee impressions. Somehow, the baby had managed to push open the door that Logan must have failed to latch properly in his haste, and Lily was heading straight for the motionless form of the bear cub, one tiny hand clutching something Savannah couldn't quite make out in the blinding snow. Savannah's heart hammered against her ribs as she plunged into the snow without pausing to grab a coat. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath away. The wind whipped her long brown hair across her face as she stumbled forward, arms outstretched toward her baby. "Lily, no!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the howling gale. The snow reached her knees, each step a struggle against the growing drifts. Savannah's thin indoor clothes offered almost no protection against the bitter cold that seemed to cut straight to her bones. Already, her fingers were turning numb, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. But none of that mattered. Only Lily mattered. The baby had nearly reached the collapsed bear cub, her small body leaving a chaotic trail through the deepening snow. Now, Savannah could see what Lily clutched in her tiny fist, the half loaf of bread from the kitchen counter. Somehow, her little daughter had managed to grab it on her way out the door. Lily's movements were slowing, her little limbs growing sluggish in the extreme cold. The red onesie stood out like a drop of blood against the pristine, white landscape, a beacon of vulnerability that made Savannah's maternal instincts scream in terror. A baby couldn't survive more than minutes in these temperatures. Just as Savannah was about to reach her daughter, a loud crack echoed through the valley, the unmistakable sound of a tree branch giving way under the weight of ice and snow. Savannah looked up just in time to see a massive pine bough come crashing down between her and Lily, missing the baby by mere inches, but creating a thorny barrier of needles and ice. "Lily!" Savannah cried, frantically trying to find a way around or through the fallen branch. Every second counted now. Her daughter's life depended on those seconds. Oblivious to the danger, Lily finally reached the motionless bear cub. The small creature lay half buried in snow, its breathing so shallow that it barely disturbed the white powder gathering on its muzzle. The baby plopped down beside the cub and, with surprising gentleness, placed her tiny hand on its matted fur. The cub's eyes fluttered open, revealing a gaze clouded with pain and exhaustion. It let out a weak whimper that seemed to convey both fear and resignation. This close to death, even a human baby might be perceived as a threat. But instead of backing away, Lily did something extraordinary. She broke off a piece of the bread in her small hand and held it out to the cub, babbling softly as if trying to communicate. The simple gesture, offering food to a creature in need, seemed to transcend the natural boundaries between species. The cub's nostrils flared, catching the scent of the bread. With what appeared to be enormous effort, it lifted its head slightly, sniffing at the offering. Lily pushed the bread closer until it touched the cub's muzzle. Savannah had finally found a way around the fallen branch, but she froze at the sight before her. The starving bear cub, mustering its remaining strength, gently took the piece of bread from Lily's outstretched hand. The baby giggled, delighted by the soft tickle of the cub's mouth against her palm. For a heartbeat, time seemed suspended. The howling wind, the biting cold, the looming danger, all receded into the background. What remained was this impossible moment of connection between a human baby and a wild animal, linked by the simple act of sharing food. Then reality came crashing back as Savannah heard a deep, rumbling growl that made her blood turn to ice. Emerging from the thick curtain of snowfall like a nightmare-given form was an enormous female bear, the cub's mother. Her massive body moved with surprising grace through the deep snow, powerful muscles rippling beneath her thick winter coat. Unlike her cub, this bear wasn't starving. She was massive, powerful, and now, faced with a human near her offspring, potentially deadly. The mother bear's eyes, small and dark against her broad face, fixed on Lily with unnerving intensity. Her lips pulled back to reveal yellowed teeth the length of a man's fingers. Another growl, deeper this time, vibrated through the clearing, a primal warning that needed no translation. "Lily," Savannah whispered, afraid that any sudden movement might trigger the bear's predatory instincts. "Don't move, baby. Please, don't move." But Lily, utterly fearless in her innocence, simply broke off another piece of bread and held it out toward the mother bear, mimicking the gesture she had made to the cub. She babbled happily, completely unaware of the mortal danger looming over her. The mother bear paused, her enormous head tilting slightly as if confused by this tiny human's behavior. Bears were intelligent creatures, capable of complex decision-making and emotional responses. This wasn't the threatening behavior she expected from humans. Savannah inched forward, her maternal instinct overriding her fear. If the bear attacked, she would throw herself between the animal and her child. A hopeless gesture against such a powerful predator, but one she would make without hesitation. The cub, revived slightly by the bread, let out a soft whine and attempted to rise. It managed to lift itself enough to press against Lily's side, seeking warmth. The baby responded by patting the cub's head, still offering pieces of bread to both bears. The mother bear took another step forward, then stopped, nostrils flaring as she processed the situation. Her cub was alive but clearly weakened. This small human wasn't behaving aggressively. In fact, it appeared to be helping. Years of human encroachment on bear territory had taught most bears to fear and avoid people. But deeper than learned behavior was instinct, and the strongest instinct in any mother was to protect her young. If this strange, tiny human was somehow aiding her cub's survival, maternal instinct might override territorial aggression. The next few moments would determine whether all three of them, mother bear, human mother, and their respective babies, would survive this encounter, or whether the mountain clearing would become a scene of tragedy. And that's when Savannah heard another sound that made her heart sink even further. The mechanical growl of an approaching snowmobile. Logan was returning, unaware that he was heading straight into a potentially lethal confrontation between a protective mother and a threatened mother bear. The mother bear's head swiveled toward the noise, her posture immediately shifting from curious to defensive. Her powerful forelegs planted firmly in the snow, her head lowered, a warning growl building in her throat. To her, the approaching machine represented a far greater threat than the small human child. Savannah had only seconds to act before disaster struck from multiple directions. "Logan, stop!" Savannah screamed into the wind, her voice breaking with desperation. But the snowmobile's engine drowned out her cries as it drew closer, its headlight cutting through the blizzard like a searchlight. The mother bear rose onto her hind legs, towering nearly 8 feet tall. A massive wall of muscle, claw, and fur poised to defend her cub. Her roar shook the very air, a primal sound that sent birds scattering from nearby trees and made Savannah's skin prickle with ancient, instinctual terror. Time seemed to slow down. Savannah saw everything with crystalline clarity. Lily, still sitting beside the cub, innocently feeding it bits of bread. The mother bear, seconds away from charging at the approaching threat. Logan, unaware of the danger as he piloted the snowmobile directly toward them. In that moment of perfect clarity, Savannah made her decision. She wouldn't reach Lily before the bear could attack, and she couldn't warn Logan in time, but she could divert the bear's attention. "Hey!" she shouted, waving her arms frantically and moving away from Lily's position. "Over here!" The mother bear's attention snapped toward Savannah, her small eyes tracking the sudden movement. It was working. The bear was focusing on her, rather than the approaching snowmobile or Lily. Savannah continued backing away, trying to draw the bear further from her daughter while keeping the animal's attention. Logan finally spotted Savannah through the swirling snow. The snowmobile engine's pitch changed as he let off the throttle, confusion evident even at a distance. He was still too far away to see the bears or Lily, but he could tell something was wrong by Savannah's frantic gestures. The mother bear dropped back to all fours, her massive head swinging between Savannah and the slowing snowmobile, clearly trying to assess which represented the greater threat to her cub. A low, rumbling growl continued to emanate from her chest, vibrating the snow at her feet. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening between Lily and the bear cub. The bread had given the starving cub a small surge of energy. It managed to stand on wobbling legs, pressing close to Lily for warmth. The baby giggled as the cub's wet nose touched her cheek, leaving a smudge that quickly frosted in the bitter cold. Lily was shivering now, her lips taking on a bluish tint. The red onesie, though bright and visible, offered minimal protection against the sub-zero temperatures. Hypothermia would set in quickly for a child so young and small. But incredibly, the bear cub seemed to sense this, nuzzling closer against Lily, sharing what little body heat it had left. Logan finally killed the snowmobile's engine about 50 yards away, the sudden silence almost as startling as the noise had been. He stood up, squinting through the snow, trying to make sense of the scene before him. "Savannah? What's going—" His question died in his throat as he finally spotted the mother bear, and then, to his absolute horror, Lily sitting in the snow near a bear cub. "Oh my God," he whispered, frozen in place. The mother bear's attention shifted to Logan, clearly identifying him as the source of the threatening noise. Her muscles tensed, preparing to charge. "Don't move," Savannah called to him, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Just stay still." Logan remained motionless, his face pale with terror, as he stared at his baby daughter sitting mere feet away from a wild predator and her cub. His hand instinctively moved toward the hunting knife sheathed at his belt. A pathetically inadequate defense against a full-grown bear, but his only option. The standoff might have ended in tragedy if not for what happened next. The bear cub, having eaten several pieces of bread from Lily's hand, suddenly stumbled to its feet. It shook itself, sending small clumps of snow flying from its fur, and let out a sound halfway between a whine and a playful growl. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it nudged Lily's hand with its muzzle, clearly asking for more food. Lily laughed delightedly, breaking off another piece of bread with her tiny fingers. The simple joy in her laughter carried through the clearing, cutting through the tension like a warm knife through ice. The mother bear's posture changed subtly. Her ears, which had been flattened against her head in aggression, perked forward slightly. The growl faded, replaced by a softer huffing sound, a bear's expression of uncertainty or curiosity. Savannah held her breath. She'd heard stories about the intelligence of bears, their complex social structures and capacity for what might be called compassion. But she'd never imagined witnessing it firsthand, especially not in such extreme circumstances. The cub took the bread from Lily, then did something extraordinary. It broke the piece in half with its paws and nudged one portion back toward Lily, as if returning the favor or inviting her to share. Whether this was intentional sharing or simply clumsy manipulation of the food didn't matter. The effect was spellbinding. Lily picked up the returned piece and pretended to eat it, mimicking the cub's chewing motions in the way that babies do. The mother bear watched this exchange, her aggressive stance gradually relaxing. Logan remained frozen, afraid that any movement might break this impossible moment and trigger the bear's protective instincts. His eyes met Savannah's across the clearing, a silent question passing between them. What do we do now? Savannah took a cautious step toward Lily, then another. The mother bear watched her approach but made no move to interfere. The enormous animal seemed to understand, on some level, that this human female was doing exactly what she herself would do, trying to protect her young. "It's okay," Savannah whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was reassuring, herself, the bear, or Logan. "It's going to be okay." She was only a few feet from Lily now. The cold was becoming unbearable. Her fingers had gone completely numb, and her whole body shook with violent shivers. Lily's condition was even more concerning. The baby's movements were becoming sluggish, her eyelids drooping despite the excitement of her ursine playmate. Just as Savannah was about to reach for her daughter, the wind shifted, carrying with it a new sound, distant but unmistakable. The mechanical chop of helicopter blades. A research helicopter from the nearby Wildlife Conservation Center often flew survey missions during the first major snowstorm of the season, tracking animal migrations and checking for stranded hikers. Today, their routine flight was about to intersect with a scene none of them could have anticipated. The mother bear's head jerked upward at the sound, her body tensing once again. To a wild animal, the helicopter represented an even greater threat than the snowmobile. Louder, more visible, more invasive. As the sound grew louder, the bear made a decision. She nudged her cub with her nose, urging it away from Lily. The cub resisted at first, seemingly unwilling to leave its new friend and food source. The mother bear nudged more forcefully, adding a soft growl of instruction. Finally, the cub complied, stumbling away from Lily toward its mother. But before joining her, it turned back, picking up the last piece of bread in its mouth and dropping it in Lily's lap. A final exchange, a parting gift. The mother bear gave Savannah one last look, an assessment that seemed to contain something like recognition, before turning and lumbering away into the forest, her cub following close behind. They disappeared into the thick curtain of falling snow just as the helicopter's spotlight swept over the clearing. Savannah lunged forward, finally reaching Lily and scooping her up in her arms. The baby was dangerously cold, her little body stiff and shivering violently. "Logan!" Savannah called, clutching Lily to her chest. "We need to get her inside, now!" Logan was already sprinting toward them, tearing off his heavy coat as he ran. He wrapped it around both Savannah and Lily as soon as he reached them, his face etched with fear and disbelief. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Did I just see, was that a—" "Later," Savannah cut him off, already moving toward the cabin. "We need to warm her up first." The helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight tracking their movement toward the cabin. A voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "Do you need assistance?" Logan waved his arms in affirmation, pointing urgently toward the cabin. The helicopter pilot acknowledged with a dip of the aircraft before banking away, presumably to find a landing zone nearby. As they staggered through the deep snow toward the cabin's welcoming light, Savannah looked down at Lily. The baby's eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. In her tiny fist, she still clutched the final piece of bread the bear cub had given her, refusing to let it go even as hypothermia set in. What had just transpired defied everything Savannah thought she knew about wild animals, about the boundaries between humans and nature. about the capacity for understanding across species. A bear, one of the most feared predators in these mountains, had allowed its starving cub to be fed by a human baby, and in return, that cub had shared its precious food. But there was no time to process the miracle they had witnessed. Lily needed immediate medical attention. As they reached the cabin door, Savannah could hear the helicopter landing in a clearing nearby. Help was coming, but the next few minutes would be critical for Lily's survival. And somewhere in the swirling white wilderness, a mother bear and her cub continued their struggle against the winter storm, slightly less hungry and perhaps slightly less afraid of humans than they had been before. What none of them realized was that the helicopter crew had captured the entire extraordinary encounter on their thermal imaging cameras, and that the footage would soon change not only their lives, but the way humans understood their relationship with the wild world around them. As Logan pushed open the cabin door, the wind carried one final sound from the forest, the distant, haunting call of a mother bear to her cub, a sound that seemed, just for a moment, almost like a farewell. Inside the cabin, controlled chaos erupted. Logan moved with frantic precision, stoking the fire to a roaring blaze while Savannah carefully removed Lily's snow-soaked onesie. The baby's skin was frighteningly pale, her tiny limbs stiff and mottled with patches of angry red, early signs of frostbite. Yet, despite her deteriorating condition, Lily refused to release the piece of bread the bear cub had given her. Her small fingers curled around it with surprising strength. "We need to warm her gradually," Savannah said, her nurse's training kicking in despite her own violent shivering. Too much heat too quickly could send her into shock. Logan nodded, grabbing every blanket they had and creating a nest near the fireplace, careful to position it close enough for warmth but not so near that the direct heat would be dangerous. Savannah laid Lily in the center, wrapping her in layers of soft fabric before climbing in herself, cradling the baby against her body to share her warmth. "Her pulse is too slow," Savannah whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks, "and her breathing is shallow. Logan, I don't know if—" "Don't!" Logan cut her off, his voice cracking. "She'll be fine. Help is coming." As if summoned by his words, a sharp knock came at the door. Logan rushed to open it, admitting a blast of Arctic air and two figures in heavy winter gear bearing medical insignia, the helicopter's emergency response team. "We're from Mountain Ridge Wildlife Conservation Center," the taller one said, pulling back her hood to reveal a woman in her 40s with wind-burned cheeks and sharp, assessing eyes. "Dr. Elaine Forrester. This is my colleague, Michael Hayes." The second figure nodded, already unslinging a medical kit from his shoulder. "My daughter, she was outside in the snow," Logan stammered. Dr. Forrester moved past him with purposeful strides, kneeling beside the blanket nest where Savannah cradled Lily. Her experienced hands quickly checked the baby's vital signs, face growing increasingly serious. "Moderate to severe hypothermia," she said to her colleague. "Possible frostbite on extremities. We need to stabilize her for transport." Michael nodded, pulling various items from his kit. "The chopper's ready whenever we are. Weather's giving us a small window, but it's closing fast." While they worked with practiced efficiency, Dr. Forrester asked calm, clinical questions about how long Lily had been exposed, her medical history, any allergies. Savannah answered mechanically, still processing the surreal events of the past hour. "What were you doing out there with a baby in this weather?" Dr. Forrester finally asked, the professional detachment in her voice tinged with judgment. Before Savannah could answer, Michael cleared his throat. "Elaine, you need to see this." He held up a tablet displaying thermal footage from the helicopter's cameras. "I was reviewing what we captured before landing and, well, you won't believe it." Dr. Forrester's expression changed as she watched the footage, confusion giving way to disbelief, then wonder. The thermal imaging showed the heat signatures clearly: a large adult bear, a smaller cub, a human adult, and tiny Lily sitting together in the snow. Even without color or detail, the peaceful interaction was unmistakable. "Is this real?" she whispered. "What is it?" Logan asked, peering over her shoulder. Dr. Forrester turned to them, her clinical demeanor softened by genuine amazement. "Your daughter. She was feeding a bear cub, and the mother bear, one of the most protective and potentially dangerous animals in these mountains. She just let it happen." "The cub was starving," Savannah explained, her voice hoarse with emotion and cold. "It collapsed outside our cabin. Lily somehow got out with some bread and—" She trailed off, the reality of what had happened still too extraordinary to articulate. Michael finished securing an IV line in Lily's arm, administering warm fluids to raise her core temperature. "We need to move her now," he said. "Her condition is stabilizing, but she needs proper medical care." "I'm coming with her," Savannah insisted, already trying to stand despite her own hypothermia. "Both of you need medical attention," Dr. Forrester said firmly. "The helicopter can take all of us." Logan's eyes darted around the cabin. "Let me grab some essentials and secure the place. 2 minutes." As he hurried around collecting items, Dr. Forrester continued studying the thermal footage, her scientific curiosity evident. "In 15 years of wildlife research, I've never seen anything like this," she murmured. "Bears don't just befriend human children. Their protective instincts are too strong." "It wasn't friendship," Savannah said softly, watching as Michael gently wrapped Lily in special thermal blankets. "It was recognition of need, of suffering." She looked down at Lily's small fist, still clutching the bear cub's gift. "And maybe something more." Logan returned with a duffel bag and Lily's favorite stuffed animal, a well-loved plush bear that now seemed like a prophetic choice. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. "Ready," he said, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. Together, they carefully transferred Lily onto a portable stretcher. The baby stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. For a moment, she seemed to look past them all, toward the window and the swirling snow beyond. Her tiny hand opened, revealing the piece of bread, now slightly crushed but still intact. "Bah," she said clearly, perhaps trying to say bear, or perhaps just babbling as babies do. Then her eyes closed again, her breathing slightly stronger than before. The journey through the storm to the helicopter was brutal but brief. The powerful machine waited in a small clearing about 100 yards from the cabin, its rotors maintaining a slow idle, lights cutting through the darkening afternoon. The pilot helped them aboard, securing the stretcher while Dr. Forrester briefed him on Lily's condition. As the helicopter lifted off, Savannah pressed her face to the window, watching their cabin grow smaller below them. Somewhere in those white-blanketed woods, a mother bear and her cub were fighting for survival, just as they were. The connection between their stories felt significant in ways she couldn't yet articulate. The Conservation Center's main facility was located about 20 miles away, a state-of-the-art research station that also housed a small but well-equipped medical wing for both humans and animals. In normal conditions, it would have been a short flight. But as they gained altitude, the storm's full fury became apparent. "We're flying into a hell of a cell," the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice tight with concentration. "Everyone secure your harnesses. This'll be rough." The helicopter bucked and swayed, caught in violent air currents that threatened to toss it like a toy. Savannah clutched Lily's stretcher with white-knuckled hands, whispering reassurances that were swallowed by the roar of the storm and the straining engines. Dr. Forrester remained surprisingly calm, continuing to monitor Lily's vital signs while occasionally glancing at the thermal footage on her tablet, as if the remarkable scene might hold some clue to help them through this crisis. The minutes stretched endlessly as they battled through the blizzard. Then, without warning, an especially powerful gust caught them broadside. The helicopter lurched sickeningly, sending loose items flying through the cabin. Alarms blared from the cockpit. "Engine icing," the pilot shouted. "I'm losing power. Everyone brace for—" He never finished the sentence. The helicopter dropped suddenly, eliciting screams from everyone aboard. Savannah threw herself over Lily's small body as the world tilted crazily around them. Logan reached for them but was flung against the opposite wall by the violent motion. For one terrible moment, Savannah was certain they were going to crash. Images flashed through her mind. Lily walking her first steps, saying her first words, growing up healthy and strong, future moments they might never experience. Then, miraculously, the pilot managed to level their descent. The helicopter continued to drop, but in a controlled manner that suggested a hard landing rather than a catastrophic crash. Through the windows, Savannah could see they were heading toward a small opening in the forest, perhaps an old logging clearing or natural meadow, now buried under several feet of snow. "Hold on," the pilot called. "This is going to be rough, but we'll make it." The impact, when it came, was jarring, but not devastating. The helicopter's skids hit the snow, digging deep furrows as the aircraft skidded forward. Snow sprayed in all directions, momentarily blinding them through the windows. Metal groaned, and somewhere a panel tore loose with a screech of protest. Then, finally, stillness. In the ringing silence that followed, Savannah's first thought was for Lily. She pulled back to check her daughter, terrified of what she might find. But Lily's eyes were open, alert, and curious rather than pained. The medical interventions had begun to work. Her color was better, and she was moving her limbs with more natural fluidity. "Everyone okay?" the pilot called, already working through his emergency shutdown procedure. A chorus of shaky affirmatives followed. Miraculously, no one seemed seriously injured. Dr. Forrester had a cut on her forehead, and Michael was nursing what looked like a sprained wrist, but they were alive, and the helicopter, while damaged, had remained largely intact. "Where are we?" Logan asked, moving carefully to the window. Outside, visibility was near zero in the howling blizzard. The pilot consulted his instruments, then tapped the screen with a frown. "GPS is damaged. Best guess we're about 7 miles from the center, in the Eastern Conservation Zone." 7 miles through this? Michael gestured at the storm outside. "That's a death march, especially with a baby." Dr. Forrester was already pulling emergency gear from compartments, thermal blankets, flares, a satellite phone that she examined with a grimace. "Damaged in the landing. We can stay with the helicopter and wait for rescue, or—" Her voice trailed off as she noticed something odd. Lily, still secured in her stretcher, was pointing excitedly at the window, babbling with sudden animation. Everyone turned to look. At first, there was nothing to see but swirling white. Then, a darker shape emerged from the storm, large, lumbering, unmistakable. A bear. "It's impossible," Michael whispered. "What are the odds?" But as the shape drew closer, they could see it wasn't just any bear. Even through the snow, the distinctive pattern of lighter fur on her chest was visible. The same mother bear they had encountered at the cabin. And beside her, struggling through the deep snow but moving with more energy than before, was her cub. "They followed us," Savannah breathed, disbelief warring with a strange sense that somehow this made perfect sense. "That's not possible, Doctor," Forrester said, her scientific mind rebelling against the implication. Bears don't follow helicopters. It must be a coincidence. Yet, as they watched, the mother bear approached the downed helicopter with purpose, showing none of the caution a wild animal should display toward such an unnatural object. She stopped about 20 feet away, rose up on her hind legs, not in threat but as if to get a better view, then dropped back down. The cub stayed close by her side, occasionally stumbling in the deep snow. "What do we do?" Logan asked, fear evident in his voice. After the miracle at the cabin, he wasn't taking any chances with these particular bears, but being stranded in a damaged helicopter with predators circling wasn't exactly comforting. Before anyone could answer, Lily let out a delighted squeal, reaching toward the window. The piece of bread from the cub, which she had somehow managed to hold on to through everything, was still clutched in her small hand. The cub seemed to react to Lily's voice, perking up its ears, and moving a few steps closer to the helicopter before its mother gently nudged it back with her nose. "This is unprecedented behavior," Dr. Forrester murmured, her scientific fascination overtaking her fear. "It's almost as if they're checking on her," Savannah finished softly, making sure she's okay after helping them. "That's anthropomorphizing," Michael said, though without much conviction. "Bears don't think like that." "Maybe we don't give them enough credit," the pilot suggested, watching the scene with wide eyes. "I've been flying these mountains for 20 years, and I've seen bears do some pretty intelligent things." Outside, the mother bear made a decision. She turned away from the helicopter, nudging her cub to follow. But instead of disappearing back into the storm, she began walking with deliberate slowness, stopping after about 30 feet to look back, as if waiting. "She wants us to follow her," Savannah said, the words sounding crazy even as she spoke them. Dr. Forrester shook her head. "That's not—" "Look," Logan interrupted, pointing through the window. The mother bear had walked another 20 feet, then stopped again, looking back. The pattern was unmistakable. "This is insane," Michael muttered. "We can't follow a wild bear into a blizzard." "We can't stay here either," the pilot countered. "The temperature's dropping fast, and our heating system is damaged. In a few hours, this helicopter will be as cold as a freezer." They all looked at Lily, who was still watching the bears with rapt attention. Her condition had stabilized, but she remained vulnerable. Without proper medical care soon, the consequences could be severe. "I've studied bears my entire career," Dr. Forrester said slowly, as if coming to terms with something that challenged her scientific worldview. "And while I'd never suggest this under normal circumstances, these aren't normal circumstances." She took a deep breath. "Bears know these mountains better than any human. They know where to find shelter in storms. You can't seriously be suggesting we follow them," Michael protested. "Do you have a better idea?" she countered. "The center's rescue team won't find us in these conditions. Not with our locator damaged. We have maybe 3 hours of battery power for minimal heat, and overnight temperatures will hit 20 below." A heavy silence fell over the cabin as they all considered their limited options. Death by freezing if they stayed. Death by exposure if they tried to navigate the blizzard alone. Our trust in something that defied rational explanation. A wild bear apparently offering guidance. Outside, the mother bear waited patiently, her cub now sitting in the snow beside her, both watching the helicopter with uncanny focus. Finally, Logan spoke. "I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I've hunted, hiked, even tracked bears." He looked at Savannah and Lily, determination hardening his features. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think we should follow them." Savannah nodded, surprising herself with how right the decision felt, despite its apparent madness. The bear could have killed us all back at the cabin. Instead, her cub and our baby shared food. She stroked Lily's hair, now dry and fluffier after the warming treatments. If that's not a sign to trust, I don't know what is. Dr. Forrester and Michael exchanged glances, years of scientific training warring with the undeniable reality before them. Finally, the doctor nodded. "I'll document everything," she said, holding up her tablet. "Even if no one ever believes us, we'll have the record." "If we survive," Michael added grimly, but he was already gathering emergency supplies into backpacks. The pilot, a practical man more concerned with survival than scientific anomalies, began distributing the helicopter's emergency gear: thermal blankets, flares, water bottles, energy bars, a compass, and a hand-crank emergency radio. "If we're really doing this," he said, "we need to move fast while there's still daylight." They bundled Lily in multiple layers of a thermal protection. Savannah would carry her, strapped securely to her chest in a makeshift carrier fashioned from a rescue harness. Logan took the heaviest pack, Doctor. Forrester secured her precious tablet in waterproof casing, and Michael, despite his injured wrist, insisted on carrying the medical supplies. Before opening the helicopter door, they all paused, looking at each other with the solemn understanding that they were putting their lives in the paws of a wild animal, perhaps the most counterintuitive decision any of them had ever made. "If this works," Dr. Forrester said quietly, "it will change everything we think we know about interspecies communication and animal cognition." "If this works," the pilot responded pragmatically, "I'll just be happy to be alive." Logan opened the door, allowing a blast of Arctic air to invade the cabin. The bear and her cub remained where they were, watching expectantly as the humans emerged one by one into the blinding snow. As they stood huddled together beside the downed helicopter, the mother bear made a soft huffing sound, not threatening, almost conversational, before turning and walking slowly into the storm, her cub beside her. After sharing one last look of mutual reassurance, or perhaps mutual acknowledgement of their shared insanity, the group began to follow, trudging through snow that reached mid-thigh in places. Lily, secure against Savannah's chest, still clutched the piece of bread in her tiny fist. As they walked, she held it out toward the bear cub, babbling happily as if continuing a conversation only she and the young animal could understand. The strangest procession in the history of the Mountain Ridge wilderness moved slowly through the blizzard. A mother bear leading her cub, and 5 humans deeper into territory no human would willingly enter in such weather, bound together by circumstance, desperation, and something else that had no scientific name but felt, in that moment, like trust. The world had narrowed to a bubble of white, with visibility extending barely 10 feet in any direction. Wind howled around them, driving ice crystals that stung exposed skin like tiny needles. The only constant was the dark shape of the mother bear, materializing and then fading like a ghost as she led them forward, always maintaining the same careful distance. Close enough to follow, far enough to respect her wild nature. "This is madness," Michael shouted over the wind, his medical training and rational mind still rebelling against their decision. "We're following a wild predator into a blizzard with a sick baby." "You were free to stay with the helicopter," Dr. Forrester called back, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her own doubts. Every few minutes, she documented their bizarre journey with her tablet's camera, capturing what she could through the swirling snow. Logan trudged silently, his hunter's instincts heightened, watching the bear's movements with intense focus. Every step they took led them deeper into wilderness. farther from known trails and ranger stations. Yet the bear moved with unmistakable purpose, occasionally stopping to ensure they were still following, her massive head turning to check their progress before continuing onward. The cub stayed close to its mother, occasionally venturing a few feet to the side to investigate something beneath the snow, but always returning to her protective shadow. Its movements were stronger now, more coordinated, the small infusion of energy from the bread seemingly making a difference in its stamina. Savannah focused entirely on Lily, monitoring her breathing and temperature against her chest. The baby had fallen into a light doze, lulled by the rhythm of walking and the multiple layers of insulation. The piece of bread from the bear cub remained clutched in her small hand, a talisman connecting the unlikely companions. "How much farther can we go?" the pilot asked after nearly an hour of trudging through deepening snow. Temperatures dropping fast with sundown. He was right. The gray light of the stormy afternoon was fading to a dangerous twilight. In these mountains, nighttime temperatures during a blizzard could plummet to lethal levels within minutes of sunset. Already, frost was forming on their eyebrows and eyelashes, their breath freezing in white clouds that were torn away by the relentless wind. "We need shelter soon," Logan agreed, scanning the limited visibility around them for any landmark he might recognize. But the uniform whiteness revealed nothing familiar. Not even the shape of a mountain ridge or valley to orient themselves. As if sensing their growing desperation, the mother bear suddenly changed direction, angling toward what appeared to be a steeper incline. The humans followed with increasing difficulty, the slope making their progress even slower and more exhausting. "I don't know how much longer I can carry her," Savannah admitted, her muscles burning with fatigue. Despite her determination, her body was reaching its limits after the combined trauma of cold exposure, emotional shock, and physical exertion. Logan immediately moved to her side. "Let me take her for a while," he offered, already adjusting his pack to accommodate the precious burden. But before they could transfer Lily, the mother bear stopped abruptly. She turned, looking back at them with an intensity that made them all freeze in place. Then she did something unexpected. She began pawing at the snow beside a rocky outcropping that had been almost invisible in the whiteness until they were upon it. "What's she doing?" Michael asked, huddling closer to the group for warmth and security. Dr. Forrester watched with professional fascination. "Bears dig dens for winter hibernation," she explained. "But it's too early in the season for that, and she wouldn't be showing it to us if—" Her scientific explanation died away as the bear's powerful digging revealed something distinctly unnatural beneath the snow. Weathered wooden boards. "Is that a cabin?" the pilot asked incredulously. It wasn't quite a cabin, but as they moved closer and helped clear away more snow, they discovered what appeared to be the entrance to an old mine shaft, partially collapsed but still intact enough to provide shelter. Rough-hewn timbers framed an opening about 4 feet high, disappearing into darkness beyond. "The old Blackwater mine," Logan breathed, recognition dawning. "I thought it was on the other side of the ridge, but this must be one of the secondary entrances. My grandfather used to tell stories about it." The mother bear had stopped digging, standing aside as if presenting her discovery. The cub explored the entrance curiously, sniffing at the weathered wood before looking back at Lily with what almost seemed like expectation. "Is it safe?" Savannah asked, eyeing the aging timbers with understandable concern. "Safer than freezing to death out here," the pilot said pragmatically, already moving toward the entrance with his flashlight drawn. The beam revealed a short, partially collapsed tunnel that opened into a wider chamber beyond. The air coming from inside was significantly warmer than the howling blizzard. Not comfortable, but well above freezing. The mountain protects it from the wind, Dr. Forrester observed, professional interest overcoming her caution. And these old mines often tap into geothermal pockets. It's why animals sometimes use them for shelter during extreme weather. As if confirming her assessment, the mother bear nudged her cub toward the entrance. The small animal hesitated briefly before disappearing into the darkness beyond. After a moment's pause, as if giving the humans time to absorb the implications, the mother bear followed, her massive form surprisingly agile as she navigated the low entrance. The humans exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the crossroads they faced. Follow wild bears into a potentially unstable abandoned mine, or remain in the rapidly freezing wilderness as night fell. "We don't have a choice," Logan said quietly, adjusting his pack to enter the low opening. "I'll go first and check that it's stable." No one argued. One by one, they ducked into the mine entrance, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness ahead. The temperature difference was immediately noticeable. Still cold, but a bearable cold that didn't burn the lungs with each breath. The tunnel extended about 15 feet before opening into a chamber roughly 20 feet across. Old mining equipment, rusted carts, picks, shovels, lay scattered about, relics from another century. Support beams, blackened with age but still solid, crisscrossed the ceiling. In one corner, a small natural spring bubbled up through the rock, creating a tiny pool before disappearing back into the earth. Most surprising of all was the evidence of previous human presence, relatively recent presence. A circle of stones formed a rudimentary fire pit in the center of the chamber, with the charred remains of logs still visible. Several wooden crates had been arranged as makeshift furniture, and a stack of split firewood leaned against one wall. A ranger's emergency cache, perhaps, or a hunter's secret shelter. The bears had already made themselves comfortable on the far side of the chamber, the cub exploring while the mother watched both it and the humans with alert attention. "This is—" Dr. Forrester began, then shook her head, at a loss for words that could adequately describe the situation. "A miracle," Savannah finished softly, carefully lowering herself to sit on one of the crates. She adjusted her hold on Lily, who was beginning to stir from her doze. Small sounds of discomfort indicating she was due for another dose of medication. Michael immediately switched to medical mode, kneeling beside them to check Lily's vitals. "Her temperature is still lower than I'd like, but she's stabilizing," he reported with evident relief. "The IV fluids have helped, but we need to get her properly warm now." Logan and the pilot wasted no time getting a fire started, using the emergency fire starter from their supplies and the cached firewood. Soon, a small but strong blaze illuminated the chamber, casting flickering shadows on the rock walls and creating a center of warmth that everyone, humans and bears alike, instinctively moved toward. As the fire grew, revealing more details of their shelter, Dr. Forrester circled the chamber, examining its features with scientific curiosity. "This mine must date back to the silver rush of the 1880s, she mused, "but someone's been using it much more recently." She picked up a tin can with a modern label, studying it thoughtfully. "Probably Old Man Jenkins," Logan said, arranging their damp outer clothing near the fire to dry. He was a local hermit who lived in these mountains until about 5 years ago. Everyone thought he was crazy because he claimed to have friendly bears that would visit his camp. The irony of the statement wasn't lost on any of them as they glanced at the mother bear, who had settled her massive form on the ground, her cub curled against her side, but still watching Lily with unmistakable interest. "Not so crazy after all, it seems," the pilot murmured. Savannah carefully unwrapped some of Lily's layers now that the chamber was warming up. The baby's eyes were fully open now, bright with fever but alert. When she spotted the bear cub across the fire, she let out a delighted squeal, waving the piece of bread she still clutched in her tiny fist. The cub responded with a soft whine, rising from its mother's side and taking a hesitant step toward them. The adults tensed, even Logan reaching instinctively for his knife. But the mother bear merely watched, making no move to stop her cub or protect it from the humans. It was as if some understanding had been reached, some trust established that transcended natural instincts. "I've studied bear behavior for 20 years, Dr. Forrester whispered, recording the scene on her tablet. "This defies everything in the scientific literature. Bears don't just coexist with humans like this, especially not around their cubs." The bear cub took another tentative step forward, then another, approaching the humans with surprising boldness. Its focus remained entirely on Lily, as if the adults were simply obstacles to navigate around. "Should we stop it?" Michael asked nervously, his hand hovering protectively near Savannah and Lily. Logan shook his head, watching the mother bear's calm demeanor. I think it's okay," he said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. Savannah made the decision for all of them, shifting Lily slightly so the baby could better see the approaching cub. Some maternal instinct told her this connection, however impossible, however contrary to natural law, was important. Perhaps even crucial. The cub stopped just a few feet away from them, close enough that they could see the individual hairs of its fur, still patchy and thin from malnourishment. Its small dark eyes, intelligent and curious, fixed on Lily with unmistakable recognition. Lily babbled excitedly, still holding out the piece of bread. The significance of her refusal to relinquish or eat this particular piece suddenly became clear. She had been saving it for this moment, for this reunion. With breath held collectively around the fire, they watched as the cub carefully took the last few steps and gently accepted the bread from Lily's outstretched hand. The baby giggled as the cub's muzzle tickled her palm, completely unafraid. "She remembered," Savannah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Somehow, she knew we'd see them again." The cub retreated a few steps with its prize, then did something even more extraordinary. It broke the bread in half again, just as it had done outside the cabin. One piece it ate quickly, hunger overriding manners. The other piece it placed carefully on the ground between them, a clear offering in return. Dr. Forrester made a small, strangled sound of disbelief. That's tool use and social exchange. Bears they shouldn't be capable of." She gave up, shaking her head as scientific certainty crumbled before her eyes. "Maybe we don't give them enough credit," the pilot repeated his earlier sentiment, voice hushed with wonder. The mother bear watched the entire exchange without interfering. Her massive body relaxed despite the proximity to humans and fire, both things that should have triggered defensive reactions. When her cub returned to her side, she nuzzled it gently before settling her great head on her paws, eyes remaining alert but unthreatening. As the humans arranged their emergency supplies and prepared a simple meal from their rations, an atmosphere of surreal peace settled over the chamber. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, but in this unlikely sanctuary, predator and prey, wild and civilized, had found an unexpected harmony. Michael administered another dose of medication to Lily, checking her vital signs with growing optimism. "The antibiotics are working," he reported, "and her core temperature is almost back to normal. She's going to be okay." The relief that washed over Savannah and Logan was palpable, releasing tension they'd been carrying since the moment they realized Lily had ventured into the snow. They held each other tightly, Lily secure between them, overwhelmed by how close they had come to losing everything. "When the storm breaks, we should be able to use the emergency radio to contact the center," the pilot said, checking the hand crank device. Assuming we can get to higher ground for transmission. Dr. Forrester nodded absently, still documenting every aspect of the bear's behavior. The forecast showed the blizzard passing through by morning. We can attempt contact at first light. As they settled in for the night, arranging sleeping positions around the fire, Savannah found herself studying the mother bear across the flames. The massive predator could have killed them all with minimal effort. Her jaws alone strong enough to crush bone, her claws capable of disemboweling a full-grown moose. Yet here she was, curled protectively around her cub, seemingly content to share shelter with creatures her kind had learned to fear and avoid. What had changed? What had happened in that moment outside the cabin when Lily offered food to a starving cub? Had it simply been transaction? Food exchanged for restraint? Or was there something deeper at work, some recognition that transcended species? Some understanding that, in the face of a deadly storm, survival might depend on unlikely alliances? As she drifted toward sleep, warmed by the fire and the solid presence of Logan beside her, Savannah found herself remembering something her grandmother used to say: "The wilderness has its own wisdom, child. It speaks in a language older than words." Perhaps, she thought as consciousness faded, they were finally learning to listen. The morning brought clarity, both in the sky, now washed clean of storm clouds, and in the understanding of what had transpired in that mountain mine. The mother bear had indeed left during the night, but had returned at dawn bearing gifts: a freshly caught fish and a honeycomb, placed carefully at the entrance to the mine before she retreated to a respectful distance. Food for her rescuers, offered with the same simple generosity that Lily had shown her cub. The rescue team from the conservation center found them by tracking the emergency radio signal. They arrived expecting tragedy, and instead discovered something that would reshape scientific understanding for decades to come: footage of interspecies cooperation that defied every established behavioral pattern. Dr. Forrester's documentation became the cornerstone of a revolutionary study on animal cognition and empathy. The thermal imagery captured by the helicopter cameras provided irrefutable evidence of what many would have dismissed as impossible fantasy. In the years that followed, the Conservation Center established a special research area around that section of forest. They named it the Lily Initiative, a program dedicated to studying the untapped potential for communication and cooperation between species. The mother bear and her cub were fitted with non-invasive tracking collars, not to control their movements but to protect them from hunters and to continue documenting their unusual behavior. The cub grew strong and healthy, eventually having cubs of its own, bears that showed the same unusual comfort around humans, passed down through some combination of genetics and learned behavior. As for Lily, she recovered completely from her ordeal. As she grew from baby to toddler to young girl, she maintained a special affinity for bears that baffled and amazed wildlife experts. On supervised visits to the research area, the original bear family would appear as if summoned, greeting her with a familiarity that transcended explanation. On Lily's 5th birthday, Logan and Savannah took her to the observation platform built near their old cabin. They watched as a now mature bear, the once starving cub, emerged from the trees, 2 cubs of its own trailing behind. The bear approached the platform without fear, rising on its hind legs to place a perfect honeycomb on the edge before retreating. Lily laughed with delight, clapping her small hands. She remembered, she said simply, with a child's perfect acceptance of the miraculous. Savannah and Logan exchanged glances over their daughter's head, sharing the private knowledge that had shaped their family's path, that the deepest wisdom sometimes comes from the smallest gesture. A starving bear cub, a curious baby, and the simple act of sharing bread in the snow. And, somewhere in the mountains, A mother bear led her growing family through the wilderness, teaching them to forage and hunt and survive, and perhaps, in her own way, teaching them about the small humans who had once saved her cub, and how kindness could cross the boundaries between their worlds. Some called it a miracle. Scientists sought rational explanations, but for those who had weathered the blizzard together in that mountain mine, the truth was both simpler and more profound. That in the moment of greatest need, the distance between species can vanish, revealing the universal language of compassion that requires no words to be understood. All because a baby saw a starving bear cub collapse in the snow and did something truly shocking. She reached out to help,